Hey, my friend, welcome to today's episode. Today I have Monica Sinigretz. How are you, Monica?
I'm good. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to talking more with you and whoever's listening in.
Yeah, we're excited to talk about anxiety and self-talk. I love bringing in experts on this as well as myself. I think we all have kids that are going to fall on the spectrum somewhere. I know that I certainly do, and a lot of my clients do, and it just isn't talked about enough.
hmm I agree on that
So,
one.
Monica, for my listeners who don't know you, can you give us a little background about who you are and what brought you here today?
For sure. I'm a certified life and wellness coach with a background in both psychology and education. I've always been deeply passionate about helping others, but didn't really know how I was going to do it. But when I firsthand experienced the challenges of anxiety in middle school and not really having the awareness to know that that's what I was going through, it really made me think to myself, why don't I combine my education with my own personal experiences to support teens in navigating those stressors that are causing anxiety? And really, what I wanted to do was become that person that my teen self would have loved to have. I do understand how hard it is to find someone to talk to confide in. And I know how challenging it is to also not let the voice inside your head make you feel very small and inadequate. But I also know a life where that fear and that negative self talk doesn't stop you. And so I wanted parents or teens who are struggling to understand how to support themselves, to provide them with the support and guidance needed to not only strengthen their relationship, but find those effective strategies to support their well being.
That's amazing. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. Okay, when we started talking about this, I liked the way that you articulated self-awareness and anxiety and negative self-talk patterns and all how they correlate with anxiety, mainly like the negative self-talk and self-awareness. So what role does self-awareness play in managing anxiety and how they interact? Sorry, that took
Yeah.
me a second to spit out.
That's okay. Self awareness plays a crucial role in managing anxiety, as what it really does is not only helps teens, but also individuals like you and I recognize our triggers, our emotional responses, and realize what thought patterns are really not beneficial or are beneficial to our well being. And a big contributor to self awareness is becoming aware of your inner dialogue, which also can be referred to as self talk. And if we look at negative self talk and we put teens in that perspective, if a teen constantly has inner dialogue that's framed negatively, it can heighten their levels of anxiety because they're reinforcing feelings of self doubt, inadequacy, and worthlessness. And what really happens when they engage in that negative self talk is that they internalize those critical thoughts about themselves, which can wear down their self esteem. And often this can sound like, why does this always happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? Why can't I ever get things right? Or why does life seem so hard and unfair? So really that dialogue is very victim mode. And when teens are stuck in it and don't even have the awareness that that's the way they're speaking to themselves, they don't even know how they're impacting their own levels of anxiety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we need to be self-aware of the inner talk.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of times too, I'll hear people say they probably think I'm so stupid. Oh my goodness, like, can't believe I just said that. I'm never going to be invited again.
I was listening to a podcast episode, I think it was yesterday, and what really stuck out to me was it was a gentleman who was talking about how your brain doesn't actually know the difference between what's possible and what's not possible. So the second that you bring in a negative thought, for example, I'm not good enough, your brain is then searching for the possibility of you not being good enough. But had you not had
Mm,
spoken that into your existence, for example, or into your awareness, it wouldn't have entertained or reinforced those feelings for you.
yeah. So is there anything else that needs to be on the self-aware list besides like drawing attention to the inner talk for our kids?
Well, really, like once you're aware of it, the question then poses, okay, what do we do about it? Once you have the awareness that, okay, this is the way that I'm speaking to myself, or as a parent, I'm noticing or hearing that my teen is kind of speaking out loud negatively, then the question is, what can we do to help them develop the skill so that they become more self-aware and proactive? And what I like to say is either practicing positive affirmations and cognitive reframing. So I always encourage teens each day to keep track of or to take one negative thought or belief they have about themselves and challenge it with more of that realistic or that realistic perspective, really. So what my suggestion is they take a journal and they use a structured format. And on the left side, they jot down that negative thought. And on the right side, they write the corresponding positive affirmation or that reframe thought. So, for example, a statement that we commonly hear is, why does this always happen to me? On the right, they would counteract it with, what steps can I take to overcome this challenge? Or another example of like, what did I do to deserve this gets reframed into, how can I use this as an opportunity to grow? And what this really does is
So
help
a more
teens,
empowering.
yes,
Yeah.
more of that growth mindset. And it really helps teens recognize their thought patterns by actively engaging in reframing and really challenging them versus just like hearing it and believing it to be true.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what are some of the most common negative self-talk patterns from our teens?
Yeah, you mentioned some of them, but commonly we hear like catastrophizing. So that
Uh-huh.
sounds a lot like, if I don't do well on this test, my whole future is ruined.
Which actually makes sense neurologically. I know that you probably know this because of your background in psychology, but yeah, teenagers, their amygdala is all keyed up, so it really does feel like the end of the world. So
Hmm.
parents probably shouldn't say, "Don't be so dramatic, it's not that big of a deal," right? Because it really
Exactly.
does they really do have that amount of emotion running through their body.
Yeah, and it's heightened, like you said, and it's like it's very, very loud and intense, which makes it overwhelming for them to know how to navigate.
Yeah, which then contributes more to their anxiety because it's so
Correct.
intense, right? What are some other patterns that you've noticed that contribute to anxiety?
Yeah, so there's personalization. So when people or teens take things personally, so hearing things like, it's my fault that my friends are upset, I must have done something wrong, or you have overgeneralization. So I failed this math test, so I'm just not smart enough. Like they're the jump in the gun. They're making assumptions about themselves. You have labeling. You said, I'm not smart enough, or I'm such a loser. I always mess everything up. What I find interesting is the idea of emotional reasoning. So, hearing things like, I feel anxious, so there must be something wrong or something's going to happen. So, they're feeling these emotions come up, and really nothing's happening externally, but they're still almost expecting it to, because they're like, oh, something feels yucky and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Another two that I have are like the fear of failure. So I'll never be able to do it perfectly. So why bother trying? And a big one with teens and their age range is comparison. So everyone else is so much better at this than me.
Yeah. Do you have quality conversations when you introduce these specific ways that we can talk to ourselves to our kids? Like if we point out examples of obviously when they're not upset, but like catastrophizing, personalization, labeling, fear of failure, we're like, hey kids, these are some ways we can talk to ourselves that we need to be aware. Like just literally putting it out there point blank. Is there benefit
Yeah,
to that?
there is. Well, because sometimes, again, they're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
They're not even aware that that's the way they're speaking to themselves. But even bigger than that, they're not even aware that they're in control of their thoughts. And this used to be a big one for me was I believed all my thoughts to be true, which end up freaking me out more and more. And the more I tried to run away from them, the more they followed me and the louder they got because I was just like, I'm like, I don't want that to be true. But then I realized that, when we have an intrusive thought or a fear-based thought, if we don't become the backseat driver to it, and if we attach ourselves to it, then we're just going to perpetuate that same cycle of fear and anxiety.
Yeah. It's around the age like mid-teens, 16ish, that kids can actually think about their thinking. It's a cognitive neurological skill that we just don't really have
Hmm.
until our brain develops to that certain milestone, which is crazy. So, what strategies do you recommend then for parents to help their teens become more aware and challenge the negative self-talk that maybe they're just becoming aware of?
Yeah, so similar to like the way I work with teens and call them out from their thinking or help them become aware of it is really as a parent almost help them cognitively structure their negative thinking. So if you're hearing them talk to you in a negative way about something they're experiencing, help them counteract it by asking themselves or by asking them, is there evidence to support this thought? Or what would you say to a friend who had this thought? A simple yet powerful question that I even like to kind of stop myself in my tracks is when I have a negative thought that kind of keeps on being persistent is, okay, wait a second, Monica, how true is this? Like, let's just think about it
Yeah.
before we actually assume it to be true. And then I've also heard another strategy from parents. If your kid's saying things like, this happens to me all the time, use their verbatim back to them. Does it actually happen to you all the time? Challenge them on that thinking, right? Because oftentimes they just say it again without the awareness of what they're saying and they kind of just get away with it. Versus if you take some of those questions to bring it back to them, I'll get them to take a step back and really reflect on that internal dialogue.
Yeah. One that I like to do is so what?
Yeah.
Right when my kids are like, "Oh my goodness, I just did so bad on this test," or "I just took this test and I think it's funny, my very anxious daughter, she's like, "I did so bad on my math test today. I just know it." And she just is reeling in this anxiety about a test that she's already taken, like it's done. She always does so good, but she always feels so terrible about it. But I like to just say, "So what?" Like, "So what if you fail a test? So what if that person never calls you back? So what if they think you're stupid or, like, annoying? Like, so what?" It
Hmm.
actually sometimes we can question our beliefs and it works. Sometimes the belief is so powerful that at least I see kids, like, holding on, like, doubling down of, like, "No, this is true."
Hmm.
And so then I like to say, "So what? So what if your outfit looks stupid today? That doesn't affect your value."
Right.
I don't know. That's one tool that I like to use as well.
That's a good one too, because even when you look at it from a grades perspective, I remember being in middle school and high school and being nervous to say that I didn't do well because I would be worried about disappointing my parents or the fear of
Yeah.
judgment, right? You had to do well in school, or there was always like B's and A's needed to be the average to get, into university and college and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff, right? So if you create that safe space for them to be like, okay, mom's actually not going to mind if, here and there I don't do well, and that's fine. Then all of a sudden, not only is your daughter more likely to open up to you, but again, it relieves that pressure of all of a sudden she's feeling so heightened because she's anxious. You say, so what? And she's like, oh, yeah, so what?
Yeah, if we can show them that their value and lovability and worth isn't tied to their performance, their amount of friends, their appearance, like they just are worthy of love and goodness, like exactly as they are.
Right. And you even mentioned it to a point of sometimes that programming is at a very like deeper subconscious level,
Yeah.
where it's, we've reinforced it for years and we haven't even realized. And now it's just harder to reframe. And it takes work, and it takes like kind of like time to really believe it at your core to shift it. But even like encouraging your teens to practice positive affirmations themselves. So what I like to suggest is writing sticky notes on the bathroom mirror or getting markers. And what I used to do is every week when I would clean my washroom and like Windex my mirror, I would
Uh-huh.
then write a new affirmation to reflect what I was going through for that week. Just to kind of, whenever I went into the bathroom, just say it to myself out loud or remind myself. Or so it could be something so simple as, I'm capable of handling whatever challenges come my way, or I trust in my ability to make decisions that are right for me. And if your teen is like, no, I don't want to do that, what I would even encourage you to do is put them in random places where they won't even know that it's there. So like the inside of a cupboard, and then they they open it and they
Ta-da!
read it. Exactly, right? And even if they're not engaging it, it's still planting that seed. And it's a moment where it's like, oh, like that's nice. And hopefully by modeling that like healthy coping strategy or by seeing it, they're more likely to then engage in it themselves.
What have you seen in your practice, uh, as far as positive changes with the teams that you've worked with? What can parents expect?
Yeah, biggest one I like to see or that I have seen is increased self-regulation. So really being able to handle those big emotions when they come in. So which prevents teens from panicking, being overwhelmed, or having those aggressive outbursts. Of course, increased self-awareness. So developing a deeper understanding of their emotions, their triggers, thought patterns, improve coping skills, because now that they're aware of it, they can really stop themselves in their tracks and ask themselves, okay, what can I do to shift it into that growth mindset versus staying in victim mode? Enhanced resilience is a big one, because when a teen is able to actually overcome something by themselves, they're able to then say, okay, I've done this before, I can do this now. They bounce back from adversity that much quicker, and they have more confidence. When their confidence is higher, their decision making skills are better, and they feel more empowered as a teen, not only to trust themselves, but also to pursue and achieve some of their personal or academic goals.
Yeah, sounds like a domino effect.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like being able to better cope with stress, navigate challenges, all of those, again, like you said, domino.
Yeah. So what are a couple practical tips, strategies that we haven't discussed yet that parents can engage with to foster this in their home?
Yeah, I know a lot of parents do this already, but really kind of encouraging open communication within the home. So creating that non judgmental and safe space for them to really express their thoughts and feelings. I always favor, just like in coaching, open-ended questions to prompt that deeper conversation instead of asking questions where your team can kind of say yes or no. So
Mhm.
questions like, how are you feeling about school or work lately? Is there anything you want to work on improving? Or is there anything you're feeling uncertain or anxious about that you'd like to talk through? So asking themselves those questions to open that door is one suggestion that I like
Yeah.
to.
And they say, then we
Or they
can
give you
just
still
say
a short
offers on the
response.
table.
Yes, exactly. And again, like you said, you don't want to push. You want to definitely kind of get them to know that that conversation is there and available to them, but you still don't want to like poke them if they're not ready.
Yeah.
Um, and really, even if they're, let's say, not ready, but they're still kind of opening up to you a little bit, like take time to really validate their feelings, and acknowledging and validating them in the process really offers that reassurance and support without minimizing their experiences. And that could be something as simple as, thank you for sharing how you're feeling with me. Or, I hear what you're saying and I understand that you would feel anxious given what you're going through.
Yeah. I also like to meet kids where they're at. I know for a while, the best way to communicate with one of my kids was just snapping back and forth.
Like
We would just
Snapchat.
snap. Yeah,
Nice.
because that's one way I could get her to respond, and so they're just these little tiny sound bites, but it was still loving communication. Sometimes some of my clients, I'll advise them to like pass notes. It's so much easier to write stuff down than have to look at somebody's face and say So
Very
sometimes like
true.
passing notes or messaging in any of the platforms, I like those too as far as talking to kids who normally you'd get a meh from.
Mhm.
Meh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Because I know
it's meeting
we all
them.
have those kids.
Yeah, and it's meeting them where they're at, right? So like you
Yeah.
said, they're using Snapchat, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok. If you come across something on a platform that they're utilizing, use it to your advantage to them, connect with them.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with that one.
Uh, hey, what other gems of wisdom do you have for us, Monica?
Yeah, I like to say I touched on this a little bit earlier, but always encouraging parents to model those healthy coping strategies. So if your teen sees that you're actively doing things to manage your own anxiety and stress, mindfulness, positive self-talk, physical exercise, whatever it is that works for you, they are more likely to do the same, especially because parents are one of the biggest impacts on a teen's life, right? And even for parents to recognize their own inner dialogue,
Yeah.
you know, if you're seeing that your teen is talking negatively, like, why don't let's reflect. How are you talking to yourself?
Yeah. That's huge because so often those subtle reflections of self are what our kids take on. If we
Right.
hate our body, they're probably going to hate their body. If we hate, or love anything about ourselves, they're more likely to model that. You're right.
Absolutely.
I
And
love
it's one of
that.
those, yeah, it's one of those things too, where it's just like, again, if they see that you're proactive in your own well-being, then they're like, okay, like that seems right. But again, on the flip side, if they see that you're talking to yourself negatively or you're kind of, how do you expect them to better themselves if you're not doing that for you? And so that one
That's
I
a great
find always to
reminder.
be, yeah, one of the biggest ones. And it's just that's where the power of awareness comes in because you don't know what you don't know. But I could guarantee even a parent listening into this episode is trying to be proactive. They're trying to educate themselves and find some inspiration. And if you notice that as a parent, you're trying to do all these things and you're still feeling helpless or frustrated, or your teen's giving you those responses, like I would really suggest for you to find some level of support for you or your teen if you know it's to that degree, that specializes in working what your teen's going through. Just because, again, it's normal for teens to shy away from letting their parents in. They may have the desire for independence, lack of trust, fear of disappointment, really not wanting to burden their parents. But guiding
Yeah.
them to connect with someone outside of the family structure may be beneficial because the most important thing is that they're finding some way to address their challenges. I saw statistics that was talking about over half the teens struggling don't actually receive the support they need. And a lot of teens internalize and try not to like show their emotions. I was a victim of that too. Um, but not reaching out to someone really weighs heavily. And the teen carries that for a lot longer, which highlights the importance in having a connection. And on top of that statistic, or going off of it, it was saying that the number one report in youth suicide was not having, or sorry, was a lack of connection to an adult.
Wow.
So it's like not only are they not receiving support, but what's mitigating those stressors, what's alleviating the anxiety is having someone to talk to, is having someone raise their awareness and improve their self-regulation skills and really address the root cause, which I think is a game changer.
Yeah. I think all humans need that.
Amen.
Yep. Okay, Monica, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, I'm actively on social media. My social media handle is _conscious coach, where I'm super excited to connect more with people or share different tips and strategies, even for teens to learn those effective strategies. Or if you want to learn more about what I do and who I specifically work with, my website at www.consciouscoach.biz will have all the information.
Amazing. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
No problem, Heather. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciated it.
Heather is the one, an expert in the field. She knows her parenting stuff, including how confusing it can be. You've tried it all, and it's a lost cause. Crying want your love